Let's go straight to it. We've got Michael Wilson joining us from London for Global Business Update. Great to have you, Michael.
Morning. So a bit of a start to equities yesterday. As far as Wall Street was concerned, that's carried on to Asia Pacific. Hong Kong back after a holiday yesterday, up 5.74. The tech index there up 7%. The Nikkei 225 up about 0.5%. South Korea Kospi up a little bit, and the Kosdaq gave up early gains to fall about 1.5%. Australia not doing too badly. Inflation in South Korea slowing very slightly. Mainland China closed for the Golden Week holiday. The UN is warning, one of the other big bodies warning that the world is on the brink of recession. Monetary and fiscal policies which are tightening in advanced economies, including interest rate hikes, are making life very, very difficult indeed, and a global slowdown would probably inflict more global damage than the financial crisis in 2008 and the COVID-19 shock in 2020. That's according to the UN. I was talking about the United States, and stock futures fell in a sharp two-day rally after a sharp two-day rally on Wall Street yesterday. They've fallen very, very slightly. The Dow futures are down about 150, but yesterday the Dow jumped 825 points, about 2.8%. 2 straight days of gains came back on a pullback in government bond yields and so on. Meanwhile, the US is preparing for sweeping export controls to stop China efforts getting semiconductors and chip-making equipment. We'll hear more about those in the meantime. Now, we talked about political U-turns. How about this one? Elon Musk revives the deal to buy Twitter. Twitter shares have shot up as a result of it to buy companies at the original price. What on earth is going on after all that worry that he was saying about who actually is using Twitter and whether they're calling a lot of doubts about the validity of their own figures and so on. Twitter shares were actually halted yesterday. He's going to buy it at $54.20 a share. The shares jumped 22% after that. What is he going to actually do? I mean, there was supposed to be some kind of court case on October the 17th. I don't know whether that will take place or not. But what does he intend to do with Twitter? He's talking about it making like a one-stop big app, the biggest app that the world has ever seen, well, possibly. We'll see more about that. I personally would be looking at Tesla shares quite honestly, because he's clearly going to have to sell some of those of which he owns to fund the purchase. Credit Suisse is remaining under pressure. Analysts are very wary about talking about a layman comparison. It is worth looking at how this all started. I mean, never mind the history of Credit Suisse, but over the past couple of days, it was about a tweet which has since been deleted. And obviously, they've got a new CEO and all the rest of it. But I think what it does is it shows more, and this is the reason I'm mentioning it, not because it's particularly interesting in itself, or indeed that it's the right way to cast doubts about companies by broadcasting on Twitter and then withdrawing it. I think what this is showing about how big banks are actually moving into an era of increasing interest rates and thus more bad debts. That's what I think this is showing, apart from all the usual problems with Credit Suisse. Let's turn our attention to the EU. Ambassadors apparently a near deal to cap Russia oil prices. They're trying to drive down the revenue that Russia gets from its purchases. This is the 8th package. However, whilst those members of the EU who are also members of the G7 are in favour of it, remember that anything that happens within the EU has to be agreed by all the nations, and they're still trying to finalise that. They're meeting once again today and will no doubt meet tomorrow as well. Here in the UK, Conservative Party, new leader, Liz Truss, what a month she's had. She's trying to rally the MPs amid renewed Conservative infighting. There are lots of issues there, particularly not just about the U-turn on the top rate of tax, but now whether benefits will actually be raised in line with inflation, or whether it'll be wage inflation. She'd prefer wage inflation because it's lower than that. But there are lots of disruptions to follow. So whatever she manages to do in what is supposed to be a relatively short speech today may get subsumed tomorrow when there are more ructions in the Conservative Party. And it's infighting that really destroys political parties. If you remember Cameron, if you remember Theresa May, if you remember Boris Johnson as well, all the kind of infighting that the Conservatives seem particularly good at to destroy their leader. Whether or not there's going to be a leadership election, again, most commentators are casting a lot of doubt about that, given that she's got 2 years to run, but you never know with the way things are. It looks like the Bank of England didn't do a terrible thing when he's intervened in the markets. UK lenders are under pressure to cut mortgage rates if the markets stabilise. It's looking that they are at the moment, and the Bank of England has spent only in inverted commas, £7 billion in borrowing costs and in buying gilts. And if borrowing costs are actually falling, then that's going to be okay for mortgages, but nothing will happen in the short term. And on the back of that, and on the back of the fact that Kwasi Kwarteng, the Chancellor, is bringing forward how he's going to cut debt and how he's going to plug the fiscal hole. The pound has risen to a 2 month to its highest point in 2 weeks as a result of that. But there's plenty of movement to come. And finally, as far as oil's concerned, once again, we're awaiting OPEC. Now, they're meeting face-to-face in Vienna for the first time for about a couple of years. What will the cuts be? How will they be apportioned between the various members of OPEC Plus? And I think the target is still $100 a barrel right now. It's about 90 right now. Again, we wait to see the detail of it. But the crucial thing is how those cuts will be apportioned amongst some of the less willing members of OPEC Plus. That's the global view this morning.
All right, Michael, I think the crucial thing is seeing that fiscal plan that Kwasi Kwarteng also have released before he released that mini budget. And I don't know why he's trying to backtrack, by saying the mini budget was actually a good idea. It wasn't a good idea. It failed the test. Your first test for anything you do obviously will be the market. It also failed the test with the people. And he should be lucky that he's still keeping his position as Chancellor of the Exchequer. So I don't know where he's getting that feel of triumphalism. I hear the conference is in tatters as we speak. The backbenchers are not happy with them. They've just lost whatever the next election might hold for the Conservative Party.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the conference is probably the worst that has been around for a number of years, and there's an enormous amount of infighting, as I was illustrating there. And I think any thoughts of triumphalism are completely wrong as far as the Chancellor is concerned. He seems to be quite steadfast in more change to come, and I suspect we're probably going to see that. I think most people in the Conservative Party are very fearful about a general election. Not necessarily it's going to come sooner than they expect it's going to, but when it actually happens, a lot of them are resigned to defeat. What the Labour Party will do, of course, is a different matter entirely. And again, that's something which, if the Labour Party is generally accruing the kind of trust that it lost over the Jeremy Corbyn years, then that does sound the death knell really for conservatism in this country. But there's a long way to go. The only thing I would agree with as far as the general, I don't agree with triumphalism, I don't agree with political bombast, but I think to say that, a few days of market tumult need to be, I think you need to roll the ground, as we would say in cricket terms. You need to prepare the pitch and so on, roll the pitch, if you like, before these things are actually happening. And they admit that the Conservatives admit that they're relatively young and they didn't do that, and they should have cleared a lot of these things with the party. But that's happened now, and I think they've got to cover it. But I think there's a certain feeling, and I think this is probably right, that the markets are kind of quietening down very, very slightly. But the key is going to be when the Office for Budget Responsibility casts its eye over the Tory party homework and says okay or not okay as far as it's going to be. And I think there'll be a big change in the markets on that day. We don't know when that is yet.
Okay, Michael, quite a number of things. I don't know whether we have enough time to deal with that. The first one, Elon Musk. What are we dealing with here? Is it Elon Musk's erratic behavior, or the fear that he and his attorneys are likely to lose the Delaware Court of Chancery that was already scheduled to start the trial, the matter, on October 17? Or is this just, another trick out of the box? And what are the implications for those banks those leverage financing sources, who are now facing a situation whereby, Elon Musk has done a complete U-turn, like Liz Truss and our Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng. That's number one. Number two, you talked about semiconductors. Yes, the U.S. is trying to, further rein in, China and all of that and restrict China's opportunity. But the CEO, of Qualcomm is saying that, no, we don't have any issues again with supply and demand, challenges with regard to semiconductors. Is that true? Or is that restricted to certain countries? Because there's also inequity in terms of the abilities of countries, in that semiconductors market. And finally, OPEC Plus meets today. And we're told that Saudi Arabia and Russia, I don't want to call it a gang up. We're told that they are likely to insist on supply cuts of up to 1 million, 2 million barrels per day. Where does that leave the United States? Following that Joe Biden visit 2 months ago to Riyadh, and the assurances, the diplomatic effort to see how, Saudi Arabia can be on the side of United States. But the big issue, of course, is to manage supply and demand, to manage prices, and to make sure that the prices continue to go up. But if that happens, with the EU planning to put a cap on oil prices from Russia, if you have that cut today at that meeting, it will be to the advantage of Russia. What are the likely countermeasures that we're likely to see if that happens?
I'm very doubtful about cuts on prices of oil and gas coming from Russia, quite honestly, because there are so many countries that are not. There are neither members of the EU nor members of the G7 who are quite happy to take Russian oil and gas at a discount. So it really depends on them, quite honestly. I mean, I've always been skeptical about any kind of plan. I mean, it says a lot when, if you can get all the countries within the EU to agree to it, but it doesn't count for anything if there are other countries vying to get discounted oil, particularly China and India, for example, getting a discounted energy from Russia. So I think it'll be nominal more than anything else. As far as OPEC Plus is concerned, I don't think Saudi Arabia is on any side apart from its own. And I think that Russia and Saudi may well call for those cuts. 1 million barrels a day is not an enormous amount. 2 million barrels a day is now you start talking about, given that I think I'm right in saying that the demand from the world is about $100 million a barrel a day. So you're talking about 1% off there, not a great deal. 2%, I think now you begin to talk. But of course, the most important thing is, of course, it falls across all the nations who are members of OPEC Plus. They've all got their quotas, and a lot of those are not actually getting to those quotas right now. So what on earth are they going to do? I think that's the interesting fallout from OPEC Plus. I wouldn't like to. I have no idea what's going to happen, but those are the kind of things that I, as a journalist, would be very, very interested indeed. Semiconductors in the United States. Well, all I can say is a further move to try to stop people exporting semiconductor production equipment to China, and also semiconductors themselves are further going on in the trade war. I mean, what's at stake is this incredible technology, which is really what they're trying to do is they're trying apparently, and I can barely envisage this. I don't know about you. They're trying to get semiconductors down so that you could actually attach them to the side of an atom. So we're talking about nanotechnology writ large. Now, at the moment, I think I'm right in saying that China is not a world leader in that, but the United States is, and I think South Korea is too. That's really what's at stake here. But that's a long way ahead. So what you're really trying to do, what they're really trying to do, is to try to stop China getting hold of that kind of ability and that kind of technology. And finally, Elon Musk. What can you say? I mean, it looks like from what they're saying here. And what I've been reading in the markets here is that, yeah, it's a U-turn. I would certainly be watching Tesla shares, but also wondering what on earth he's going to do with the company. I mean, why has it suddenly changed from a company that wasn't apparently, according to him, issuing very reliant customer numbers to something which is now going to be the one-stop app, the world-leading one-stop app. I mean, it may well be. Will it be a bit like China WeChat writ large? Yes, it probably will.
Right.
But do we know? No, we don't. Do we gaze on in wonder at what's going on? Yes, we do. Do we wonder as journalists what's going to happen? Yes, we do. My advice is follow Tesla shares.
All right, a very good one. It's a joke gone too far, but it's fine. It happens. He'll sort it out. Thanks so much for your time, Michael. Rotus, how's it going?
It's going well. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning to all our viewers. So, lots of oil and gas stories coming off the African continents, particularly in Nigeria. The NNPC Limited, now a commercial entity, of course, released its financials for 2021, and for the consecutive years now, they've declared a profit. So you take a look at the numbers, mostly boosted by crude oil sales. There was a big jump from 2020 when they declared 274 billion naira profits to this year, 2021, where you had a 674 billion naira profit. And essentially, crude oil sales, I mean, if you look at where we were in 2020, oil prices falling and the lockdowns, I think if I was looking at the notes to the account, they went from 800 billion or so in 2020 to about 1.8 trillion or so in 2021. So you can see the big jump in revenue there. Their costs also went up. Now, you'll notice that the profit before tax was actually, there was a 23% difference. It was declined from where we were in 2020. But then you'll notice the profit after tax, there was a jump. So they've got a tax credit of about 123 million naira or billion, in 2021, which boosted the profit after tax. They paid taxes in 2020. So that's the difference between that drop you see in profit before tax and then the increase in profit after tax. So they got a tax credit. And then the other intangibles, assets grew as well. So, but there's a quote from them. Here's take a look at this quote here from this financial statement. I think Mele Kyari also mentioned this at their press conference. It says the performance would have been greater if the operations in the year under review were free from incessant vandalism, crude oil, and products theft, among others. So that continues to be an issue, and as you can see, it's actually reflected in the performance of the company. Coming out of Rivers State, Eroton, exploration and production company, there was an explosion that hit their oil field in Rivers State. They operate OML 18. It's part of a joint venture with the NNPC. They acquired the asset, I think it was back in 2015, from Shell, Total, and ENI. The National Oil Spills Detection and Response Agency, they've responded. They say they've noted the fact that this explosion has happened. Big fire that was discovered there. Authorities are still trying to determine the cause. I can imagine that our correspondent down south, Oviteme George, will be on top of that any moment now. So we'll look for more details from there. The World Bank has released its biannual Africa Pulse report. I think it released this just yesterday. And it highlighted Nigeria's debt, how Nigeria's debt continues to be a challenge. It actually highlighted Nigeria and Angola. Because of oil proceeds, Angola's debts, I think they're going, debt to GDP, I think from about 80, debt service to revenue ratio for Angola going from 80% this year to about 66 next year. For Nigeria, the World Bank is projecting that our debt service to revenue is going to go up to 102%, so it's going to increase. There should be a quote from them where they stated that public debt in Nigeria is a concern. The combination of low production in the oil industry and unsustainable subsidies again popping up, is one of the main obstacles to attaining debt sustainability. So you can see that this continues to be an issue for us, and the relevant authorities continue to raise them. Again, this is going to be another challenge for whoever comes into office in the new year. Zainab Ahmed and Gordon Emefiele, they spoke at a deposit insurance workshop. This is the International Association of Deposit Insurers Africa Regional Committee technical workshop where they talked about, I guess, the safety of the industry with respect to depositors and how the financial landscape has changed, the rise of fintechs and what they mean for the industry. There's a quote here from Godwin Emefiele. He's talking about the work that the CBN and the NDIC, that's the Nigeria Deposit Insurance Corporation, have done. Our deposit insurance system is a component of financial safety arrangements, is a risk minimizer model, and has been very effective in the discharge of its mandate. CBN and NDIC, that's again the Nigeria Deposit Insurance Corporation, represent key components of Nigeria's financial safety net arrangements. That partly explains why we have been able to successfully resolve a series of financial crises that have confronted us with satisfying results. On her part, Zainab Ahmed also highlighted the fact that regulators have to be on top of their game. Her saying we are living in very turbulent times and facing different types of crises, COVID-19, climate change, Russia war in Ukraine, and also hyperinflation across the globe. These crises are beginning to become normal. And what this means is that we should be prepared to address them. We also have disruptive technologies. This is a reality today and cannot be swept under the carpet. Fintech has come to stay, and we have to deal with it. And then finally, the Advertising Regulatory Council of Nigeria, they are suing Meta about 30 billion naira for what they call illegal ads. They say they've allowed these ads to be exposed to the Nigerian public without being vetted, without being paid for, and they're suing them.
All right, okay.
NNPC
NNPC, yeah.
declares profit.
Second consecutive year in a row.
In, was it 2020? They declared about 287 billion.
Yeah.
2021, they've declared 687 billion. Okay, are those, profits that have been declared, are they commensurate with assets, oil and gas assets that the country has? The second point to note is that NNPC is a new entity now. It's now NNPC Limited.
Right.
The third point is that under Mele Kyari, we have seen greater transparency and accountability. Before now, who declared anything? There was so much opaqueness. So, to the extent that this may be an indication, of a new regime, a new dispensation, a new transition in the NNPC, I think it makes sense. But if you look at, the entire field, the industry, oil companies are not profitable. But the efforts being made, well, fine. But the bigger problem we have here, as was pointed out in another instance that you brought up, the IADI conference, where the major stakeholders, the CBN governor, the person in charge of NDIC, and also the Minister of Finance and Budget Planning spoke, is that we have the problem of crude oil theft. We have the problem of vandalism. We have the problem of foreign exchange. And the World Bank, which is the other story that you brought up, put its fingers on it when they pointed out that, look, the major problem that Nigeria has is the fact that the oil sector is unproductive. Or rather, they use the phrase underproducing. And the underproduction you can link with some of these other things. And that was why I raised the question with regard to the NNPC. The NNPC declaring, huge profit. Okay, is that commensurate? Can we subject that to further scrutiny? Could we have made more money?
Yes, we could.
If that oil and gas industry was in the right place. Now, you spoke about the CBN governor expressing concern about fintechs. Yes, fintechs have been very disruptive, but you can't take away from their innovation.
Right.
And that's why the Minister of Finance and Budget Planning could say with confidence that, look, fintechs have come to stay. They are not going to just disappear.
Right.
What is important, which was also something that was admitted by the CBN governor, is that you just need to strengthen regulatory controls and framework. And that if you strengthen those regulatory frameworks and controls, then of course, it could be a win-win situation for both the country and those who invest in fintechs. We have seen a similar example in Kenya. I'm surprised you had no story from Kenya today.
I went to
but when you talk about fintechs and the story that came out of the IADI workshop, you see, how those regulatory frameworks, seem to be in place and people are pursuing them. Now, and the CBN governor made a point. He said, yes, while strong regulatory frameworks will be in place, the fintechs who are involved in a lot of innovation, P2P, international remittances and all of that, that if any fintech wants to become a bank,
bring money.
what you should do is just apply for a license.
Exactly.
And the cost of the license, I think he said, is 25 billion naira.
Yep.
Okay, so we're likely to see more innovation, more developments. As for the explosions in Eroton, Eroton oil wells. Now, this is not the first time.
Yeah.
It happened in Emo. It happened with Aitio.
Yep.
In Nimbe,
Yep.
Bayelsa State. And our problem, our concern has always been the state of the infrastructure. We have decaying infrastructure.
Correct.
2, the responsibility of the agencies. Nostra says, oh, it has deployed a vendor to move in. I hope it will not be the same situation that we had with Aitio in Nembe, whereby the thing went on and on and on. The experts, the technical experts were not in Nigeria. They were supposed to come from outer space. And it took them a very long time to come from outer space. In the meantime, a lot of damage was done to the ecological system, the environment, with grave implications for the people in the community. So it's not a straightforward thing that you just say, oh, there's been an explosion, we are going to send vendors, we are going to respond quickly. How quickly? Who has done the damage assessment, even with the ITO wellheads in the eastern flank, So these are some of the problems, and I think that we need to put them on the table for, those who are the major stakeholders to realize that they are not just there to carry title all over the place or make statements, but to make sure that they make a difference in real terms. This won't be the last explosion or fire that you will have. And the question is, why is it so? Always.
Right, I hear there's no time, so maybe we'll just proceed.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rotus.